In November of 1994, Sega launches its Sega Saturn in Japan.
At the time of conception, it was going to be basically just a really souped-up 2D machine with a little bit of hardware devoted to 3D. And once PlayStation announced their specs and it was going to be this full 3D machine, I think they went in there and kind of retooled it in a hurry, and it probably wasn't as efficient or as powerful as it probably should have been.
Ha ha! So you made it this far, huh?
It actually went quite well in Japan, and Saturn had a long lifespan in Japan.
Thanks to strong arcade ports like Sega's Virtua Fighter series, the Saturn sells 5.8 million units in 3 years.
In Japan, Virtua Fighter is a phenomenon beyond anything we could even compare it to in the United States. I mean, nothing compares to how big it is there. And the idea of bringing that home and being able to play was a very bold, intelligent move on their part.
In Japan at this point, the arcades were still hot. The arcades had been dead for 10 years here in America, but in Japan, having an arcade hit meant something. So Saturn had an arcade hit.
The Saturn does not catch on outside of Japan, and is quickly eclipsed by Sony's PlayStation.
The Saturn launched before PlayStation, I believe in the summer of 1995, which was the wrong time to launch. Also at a very expensive price point. I believe it launched at $399 versus $299, and did not have very good games. Were not that fun to play. And as we all know, if you want to play a game, you want to have fun.
They were looking to be like this kind of hardcore gamers machine with these ports of the arcade games, where the Sony came in with a completely different approach. You know, they wanted this to be a games machine for everybody, and they kind of really shifted the perception of everybody, of the consumers, towards what a game machine is.
I think for the people who purchased Saturn, they were quite satisfied with the games that they got. There were some wonderful gameplay experiences available on the Saturn that weren't available elsewhere, so it was a purchase that ended up being of value to consumers. If people were purchasing Saturn because they felt like they could get 10 years worth of gameplay out of it with sufficient gameplay innovation over that period of time, I would say those people were probably disappointed.
The
Sega Saturn was very successful with the hardcore gamer crowd, and with the broader range of crowd it wasn't quite as popular, but it was still a major name.
Sega was in a really, really tough position in that they had extended themselves, they had overextended themselves. There was a time prior to Dreamcast, just prior to Dreamcast really, as Saturn was coming out, where Sega had the Saturn. In parts of the world, they were still selling the Master System. They had Pico, they had 32X, they had Genesis, they had Game Gear, they had Nomad. So yeah, that's 7 systems concurrently. They had really gotten themselves into a rut. They had completely botched the Saturn launch in North America.
I believe if we look at Saturn, it was a system that shouldn't have been launched. It was too difficult to develop for, therefore the games were not fun and the games weren't there. This is not about hardware. This is about software. Software has always driven hardware. You don't have the software, the hardware will fail.
Saturn's failure causes Sega to lose $267.9 million and lay off 30% of its workforce.
There was all of a sudden a couple of years where they didn't have any kind of a console at all. And since Sega was very much a hardware-specific company, that was a very big problem.
Sega's solution is to begin work on a brand new console.